see my screen?
Yes, we can see. Fine.
Excellent. Very good. Thanks a lot. So I'm Sven Schade, and I'm working for the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And our team carries out a lot of work on citizen science, especially related to environmental policies in the European Union. And for many years, this also includes work with the second team here at the JRC, dedicated to invasive alien species and actually hosting the European Alien Species Information Network, EASIN. Some of the colleagues are here today. I think Anna Cristina and Eugenio from EASIN are in, as well as Fabiano and Irena from our team. And actually a lot of the work which I'm showing today is based on the development capacity of Fabiano and Irena, who actually are our core developers for this activity. So at the end, I have the honor to introduce some thoughts from our work, and I was hesitating a bit whether to talk about what is now happening to mount insects to hardware, to measure a smell, for example, or to talk about tattoos on plants for doing all kinds of sensory measurements. However, I decided to take a more conservative approach in the end, going a little bit more through the timeline we had and some recent developments we carried out, and also give a bit of a perspective for the future. So this is basically what I will speak about today. I will start to say very few words about mobile applications, then going, of course, to the important element of image recognition, moving to social media, saying a bit about that, and at the very end, I'll draw out a little bit of a vision that we currently develop as the potential future of our own work on the topic. Of course, I know that we will have the experts on image recognition speaking just after from PlantNet, so I will only briefly touch that part. And when it comes to social media, we will also hear more from Stefan a bit later, so I will only look into a particular aspect in there. So to start, we already heard from Tim just in the opening now that there are lots of apps already out there, and they have become quite prominent and popular over the last almost 10 years to actually monitor or record observation of invasive alien species. And basically, we also developed our own experience in this field with the Invasive Alien Species in Europe app, which is one of many, but it is actually dedicated to invasive alien species of union concern, so the formal regulation that Elena mentioned before, and it has some additional functionality I will tell you in a second. Apart from that, it has been developed for a while. It has a rich underlying infrastructure that we benefit from also for activities I show later on. It's fully integrated into EASIN. It has more than 11 languages and keep adding. So that's already a part of what the story we went through in the past 6 years. And of course, it's registered in the platforms on Google and Apple. But at the same time, there is also the data provided openly with an official metadata entry in an open data catalog. And the entire source code is also available for reuse on GitHub. And for example, just last year, we saw that the source code was entirely reused to develop a capacity in Croatia with the Croatian ministry that is responsible for invasive alien species monitoring and management. So this is just a very rough overview of, as I said, one app of many, but I wanted to highlight one functionality we think it's particularly relevant here, and this is that we included and keep working on a sort of roaming of this app. So actually it is responsive depending on where you are. So basically we are using this technology to identify where you currently are. If we have a local, national or regional partner in the area where you are, and if so, you will actually see who we are partnering with, and more importantly, the app is automatically extended by a list for invasive alien species, which are not necessarily of union concern, but of concern for a particular region. So you actually have this dynamics that we can adapt also to local and regional species lists and include them in the app in this manner. We want still to experiment to also derive data flows, that data goes somewhere else than EASIN, depending on where you are. But so far we didn't get a request from a member state, so this is still on hold. So this is as much as I want to say on mobile apps, because you're all familiar with those. As key findings, of course, there is a strong portfolio of apps which persisted over time. But we also understood that an app alone is certainly not enough. So apps are only one way to capture information, and certainly there are many other possibilities. And then there is a possible question: did we really reach the limits with apps? So is it as far as we can get, or is there still room for improvements of mobile apps, or should we look for new possibilities? What was also an interesting and very good development in the past is that we see more and more interconnectivity of the results, and data gets more and more integrated. So this is certainly an observation on the positive side. Now, if we look at a second key technology, and as I said, I will only very briefly touch it because we will hear more about this in a few minutes. There are, of course, also different models out there to identify species, mostly from pictures. And here we also did some testing a while ago to reuse an existing model for species recognition. We were particularly selecting a model of iNaturalist, which was developed back in 2017. We selected for this model because the species which can be recognized by it cover quite a good range of the invasive alien species of union concern. Not all of them, but they cover some of them. And we basically were investigating how many pictures, which kind of pictures you would need to actually identify a species from an image, with mixed results. So we basically also learned a lot that one model doesn't fit all, and you may have to tailor models quite a bit to fit your own needs. But certainly also this is a recognized area of using relatively novel technologies, and certainly an area which will continue in importance, especially if we see more and more images actually delivered by citizen scientists and less validators available. So it's really important to see how these image recognition algorithms can actually fit into a larger validation process and really reduce burdens on expert validation. Also here, just a few key findings we take out of our experience so far. So certainly models need training and tuning for a selected set of species. So you have to be very cautious which kind of species you want to identify. See how well they can be identified by a model, how to deal with species which already a human may actually have troubles distinguishing. So this is one certainly important element. And it's also, each time an image recognition model is always as good at images you provide to them, which definitely is a challenge when it comes to animals, especially those which are moving quite quickly. Some species can be, of course, better recognized than others. Again, it goes with the nature of images you can take, but also the characteristics of a particular species, and if they really can be identified by eyesight or even by a good image. And we also find, at least from our experience so far, difficulty in actually benchmarking existing models and find out which model suits your needs best, and eventually share and reuse models more widely and have more experience on how to fine-tune models for a particular list of species. So this is basically just a few findings we came out from the work on image recognition, which is relatively limited, I have to say, as compared to the experience of others. Then I want to touch a third technology, and this is social media. What we actually did to get an experience on the use of social media, we actually implemented and then internally tested a chatbot on Facebook. We used Facebook because we found software which was free to use for Facebook. And our ambition as a first step was to exactly replicate one-to-one the functionality of our app on Facebook. So this is basically some screenshots giving you an impression. So we succeeded in replicating. So basically you can investigate species, which basically means that you can browse through a catalog of invasive alien species, in this case of union concern. And you have a small dialogue with the chatbots where you then see images or get more information about a certain species you may be interested in. In addition, and this is the second row of screenshots, we also implemented a way to actually record observations with a chatbot. So basically, upload 1 or 2 images, or also 3 if you wish. Just leave a comment, tell us which species this is, where did you find it, at which time, and so on. So basically, as I said, this is a replication of reporting a sighting using a chatbot, which works quite smoothly. And also here, the entire back-end infrastructure, we didn't change a single bit. We use exactly the same infrastructure as we have in place for the mobile app. What we did though is to put in an intermediate little element that helps us to use the wording we have in the dialogue with the chatbots, and actually the requests to the different data we have in our infrastructure. So we have a little mediator in between for doing a translation, speaking chatbot language and speaking the language of our backend infrastructure. So this is basically something which we already put in place, and as I said, we tested this internally based on the work of Fabiano and Irena. Also here we have a couple of takeaway messages. First of all, chatbots differ a lot depending on the platform you are using. So I was showing Facebook, which leans itself quite nicely to these kind of interactions, but it would look different, for example, if you use Signal or other platforms. Also, by using these kind of third-party platforms, you create dependencies. For example, Facebook was putting up a lot of issues now in sharing location information, which is a big hurdle, and we are still working with workarounds. However, the good thing is that you may reach new audiences via chatbots. However, the audience depends on the tool and the platform you choose. So via Facebook, you reach certain people, via Signal, eventually others. But the good thing is we can also replicate interactions we had before, but we are not so sure if it's the best idea to just replicate what an app can do in a phone. So let me close with a few thoughts we have that now that we have done this kind of work I just showed you. What we now actually want to see, and where we see our long-term vision of this kind of interaction, is to really research collective intelligence. So how do you benefit from automated image recognition and these models, but also of people out there actually wanting to help and record species? And of course, we want to do this in a people-centric manner, also to eventually use this kind of interaction to explain what artificial intelligence actually is and how it may be understood, and which kind of machine you're interacting with as a citizen scientist in the examples I showed. So actually we would like to do this by combining chatbots, as I just said, together with automated image recognition and some sort of extract, transform, load, so some sort of translation between the two. And I will close with just a little diagram of interaction we currently see. So we could, for example, imagine that you would start a dialogue by uploading an image. So the chatbot would approach a user or anyone. Could you please upload an image? You throw in an image, and the chatbot uses a first simple model to say, on this image, I see 1 animal and 2 plants. Do you want to know more about any of them? Yes, I want to know more about the plant. Okay, then I ask a second image recognition model, and I tell you which plant it is. If the plant should be actually invasive and of European Union concern, then you can still ask, oh wow, maybe you want to share this information with the EASIN team. And then you would do a report as before. The exciting thing about it is that you can replicate it. So for example, if by the same process at the end to identify not an invasive species, but an endangered species, you could say, ooh, this is very interesting. Do you want to share it with a completely different group? So you create a tool which can serve multiple purposes. And then the last logical step would be to not only do this for biodiversity and species, but you could also intervene at an early stage. For example, if somebody uploads a picture about plastic waste, you may then think of a completely different processing pipeline. And at the end, you may provide the collected information to a citizen science project dealing with plastics in rivers or at coasts. So that's our vision, and hope this inspires a few thoughts also by all of you. I thank you very much, and I'm open for any kind of questions.
Thanks a lot, Sven. It was a fantastic review and a very nice talk to introduce our workshop. Very well done. So, as I wrote in the chat, we have 5 minutes for questions. So, if you have any question, you can raise your hand or you can write in the chat. Siobhan, could you please help me to spot people with the hands?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Okay. No. Ah, yeah. Pierre. Thank you.
I can ask my question?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
And then team.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sven. May I ask you, do you also plan to use audio recognition? Because for some animals, it can be also useful to complete it. So do you want to focus mainly on images for technical aspects, or do you plan to also extend this type of approach to audio model recognition, for example, or not?
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks a lot. Basically, we start from what we have. Huh? So we're basically building on the infrastructure we have already in place. And this is basically on image recognition as a starting point. And we use this also at the moment to extend our architecture to basically also have a REST or have a service which you can use to access different image recognition models. And from this, we want to elaborate on these more complex dialogues in which different image recognition models are included at different moments in time. But of course, designing the architecture in this matter keeps us completely open to include different AI models in the future. So we could indeed consider, let's say, if we go to birds, to then at a certain moment say, oh, well, sorry, this is as far as we can go with pictures. Could you maybe share a recording of the sound, and then we include it. So we design a system as flexible as possible, but of course we are bound with our own expertise and capacities to implement it. But the design will definitely go in this direction. I cannot tell you how far we are able to get, okay, but it's definitely a good idea. Absolutely.
Thank you. Tim, is your turn.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm triggered by your example of this chatbot, which is actually used to create some connects or some links between different citizen science projects. It's sending data from people to the right database or the right project, you could say. And I'm thinking about what you said with regards to interconnectivity of apps. And I was wondering if you know of any good examples of apps on alien species or citizen science or recording apps in general that have actually realized some sort of interconnectivity across projects at the level of the app, and if you know of any tools or technology to achieve that.
Thanks, Tim. There was some hiccup with your sound, but I think I got it. Huh? So the first was more a comment, and the second then the question on the interconnectivity. At the end, I think one of the main learnings is that, or the questioning is if you really need the interconnectivity at the level of apps, or if it's more really looking at the larger image of the data flow and rather have interconnectivity of the data flow, because this is what we see more happening. No? So basically you have apps as one possible input to a more complex data flow, where data can also come via web-based platforms, somebody putting something in a database directly or whatever. So actually, it may make more sense to do the integration at the data flow and at the data level. And this was a bit what I was meaning. I was more seeing more and more data from apps integrated into larger systems. And then you can eventually also see how those interconnect. So what we are talking a lot about is when to ingest the invasive alien species information that we capture into a data flow about invasive alien species and monitoring. By the system we offer, we started by a data flow that then goes to EASIN, so it's controlled at that level. We're looking for somebody who is interested in a different data flow, where the data comes from the app, and it's not even sent to our validation infrastructure, but it's sent to somebody else, for example, in a partnering country, that they validate and integrate it into their data system. It will also eventually end up in EASIN, but it takes a different path. So I think these kind of data flows and integration of data from different channels is really the one where we saw a lot of progress, but we still could do more.
Okay, thank you, Sven. That's a great answer also. And the chatbot function or tool is one example of a tool that we don't have on our provisional list of technologies, and we should for sure discuss it during the breakout. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. Any other question for Sven? I cannot see. Oh, yes, Michael. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Sven. Yeah, that was really great and really inspiring. I had 2 brief questions. So what do you think is the benefit of focusing very specifically on the use case for invasives? You hinted at the end that this could be something that does everything for everyone, but I could see there, do you think that risks diluting how you are able to focus on a particular question, or do you think that really adds value? And the second point is, do you see there being a greater future for the way that you were envisaging it or visioning it was that you would point people to a project where they could go and submit their data? I could see people being much more responsive if all you are interested in is simply harvesting some data by the chatbot saying, can we just take the data to this project? Rather than, can you go to the project and submit your data? Do you think there's a more potential for that, just or semi-automated, just harvesting the data in that way?
Excellent. Great questions, Michael. So let me take it the other way around. I start with the second one, because that is exactly the idea. Basically, the idea is that the chatbot would direct the data to whatever project is suitable. So basically, at that stage, you start with the image, then you would say, oh, this is an invasive species of union concern. Would you like to share it with would you like me to share it with EASIN? I should have written that. And then we can basically add the dialogue we already have ready. Or would you then please add the location? Where did you actually find this? At which time? And then we collect the additional attribute only at that stage when we know where the data will go and which attributes are required. So this is exactly the idea. Sorry for not clarifying it, but thanks for giving me the chance to do that now. The other one, I think it's also a very good question to reflect upon in terms of being very specific to a certain topic or being extremely generic. My short answer would be that the most important thing is to offer different opportunities to people to contribute. So there are people which are more eager to contribute to a dedicated topic like invasive alien species. And there are equally people which are more interested to play around with images, upload the images and see where it goes. So I think it's not necessarily one or the other, but offering more and more possibilities for people to contribute. I think that would be my short answer. But then, of course, it depends also how much you are interested in awareness raising about a particular issue, how much you want to focus, and then basically use the available toolbox almost for a particular campaign directed to a particular topic.
Thank you very much. Any last question for Sven? I cannot see any hands. No. So